Hello guys, another Patreon vlog here. Continue with tidying up the office, and I thought I'm having to move a lot of these games upstairs just to clear space downstairs. So I've cleared off my Calyx units. I thought it might be quite cool to, as I'm packing these away, just tell you a little bit about why I've got these games, my plans for them, and just whether or not you should buy them. As you can see, it's a rather large collection. Apologies in advance for the audio. As you can tell, I'm just recording this on my phone. Maybe a little microphone for this is next on the cards, but we'll see how it goes. So with Operation Tidy Up still continuing, my plan is to put all of these games in these two big boxes. I think it was from an IKEA footstool. They're currently reduced from about £120 to just 30 quid, so get into IKEA, they're really good for storage. But even better, you get these giant boxes, and I'm a sucker for good boxes. Up here, the reason I'm putting them in the boxes is because I'm worried about mould. Now, in here doesn't seem to be too bad, but I have stayed in previous places. The Stredball board, for example, it ended up getting covered in mould. I did treat it, and it actually came out beautifully, and I've not had really a problem, although you do have the actual stain marks on there. So I don't seem to need to worry about up in here for mould, but just in case, I'll put them in these big storage boxes. Also means that when I get around to recording battle reports, I'll be able to move them really easily. So the first game is Space Crusade. I didn't actually own this as a kid. My friends had it, and I've been looking to get it for absolutely ages, but its cost always put me off. I found this one at a car boot sale where someone was selling it for £5. Now it has none of the miniatures in it, but I thought that'd be a really cool idea for a video to make my own by finding modern miniatures and putting them in there, and it has all the component pieces, or at least I was told it does. We'll need to find out, but for £5 it was well worth the punt. Next up we have one of my favourite sort of gateway games. When Matt and I on Hobby Hoarders podcast talked about our favourite game, this has got to be one of the ones that I sort of had in mind. It's a miniatures game, so you've got your armies, you each represent a god, and it uses like hex based stuff, but it still involves games and dice and things like that. So it's really handy for that kind of thing. It's good to get people into the miniatures game without overwhelming them. So you choose a god, you recruit heroes, you recruit monsters, and you recruit warriors to fight for you. And you've got to claim Olympus, because Olympus has fallen. There's little parts that power up your god, so as your god goes through the game, they actually get more powerful. Definitely worth to check out. Unfortunately, it is Kickstarter exclusive though. That one's going in the back. Second box for it. Third box for it. I really liked it. I'm a massive fan of the sort of the Greek mythos. Ironically, one of my sort of favourite stories is of course Heracles, not Hercules because this is Greek, and the model is one of the few ones I don't like. He's got a weird pose where he's standing with a club above his head, and he's got not a great face sculpt. Next up we have Dreadfleet. Now I've actually owned this so many times throughout the years. I really love sail and sort of navy battles games, so this one to me was amazing. Unfortunately, all the ships are from different factions, and what I really wanted was a game where you had full armadas of the same faction. So I ended up buying like 4 copies of these, and then I sold them off at one point just because I didn't have time to design my own rules or paint them all. And the reason I've got this one is because at the same car boot that I found Space Crusade, they were selling these off, and this one is actually fully painted, and it was 30 quid. So absolute bargain. So I bought that one. Of course, now there's a new game that I really like called Mantic's Kings of War Armada, that's it. And it's exactly what I wanted from the game in terms of big fleets of the same races, so big fleets of orcs or big fleets of elves. And so now I kind of have what I wanted. But for 30 quid, that has some really nice terrain in it, as well as some unique models. So it was worth it just to get the terrain, to be honest. Star Trek Ascendancy. This game is 3+ player. You can get different factions for it. In the core box, you get your Klingons, your Federation, and your Romulans. And basically, you're trying to get to the objective faster than anyone else. Klingons get their objective points from winning battles, Federation get it from exploring, and the Romulans get it from research. The game itself is good, but if you are going to play this with only 3 players, or even 2 players, get yourself the Borg expansion. it's an absolute must-have, because then the Borg, which are so powerful, you have to work together, and it gives that threat rather than just, you know, the Federation just winning through being friendly to people, or the Klingons just annihilating their opponent. So for balance reasons, get the Borg expansion if you're going to get this. Is it an amazing game? No. If you like Star Trek, yes. So maybe on that one. It's a lot of fun. You've got your different little planets, and when you go to a planet, there's always like an emergency happening. So that's always quite cool, because the game itself always changes and there's a little bit of randomness involved. But like I said, 3-player games, always a bit risky. Speaking of other games, Blood Rage. I really like these series. I know that Cool Mini or Not sometimes has a bit of a reputation. However, this gives you tons of models and you get to fight in Midgard. It came out, I think, before Mythic Pantheon, and it was the first thing I sort of got. Each faction plays exactly the same, so you're on a level field there, but every sort of round, there's 3 rounds, you get different card upgrades, so your tribes can actually be different through that. Maybe you've got better warriors, maybe you have the support of the God of the Dead, so you score points when your models die. So it's got to conquer Midgard. And one of my favourite things about it is you don't actually know who's winning until the very end phase. And that's what makes a good game, in my opinion. You'll find that I've actually got all 3 of those because I think they're a really good game. Speaking of, part 3. Part 2 is somewhere in here. Ankh, made in the same series. So this time it's about the Egyptians. Again, you're each a different god from Egypt. You summon your soldiers. You have to conquer different points, and that gets you your points. This one has a mechanic where the gods merge. I personally don't tend to play with that mechanic. I just play it that you continue playing until the end of the game, or that player's just eliminated, because the merge mechanic doesn't really work that great. Another fun game. You should definitely check that out. Ikion, or Theon. It's the second part to the Messiah series. I bought this one because the first one is really, really good. Unfortunately, I've not played it yet. So yeah, can't really comment on that one. That's what they call a pile of shame, isn't it? You haven't played a game. Not entirely certain that you could call the Song of Ice and Fire a board game per se, because it is a miniature war game. They are not played on a board in the traditional sense. They're definitely a war game. I really enjoy it. It's very much akin to, you know, old fantasy, rank and flank. Each unit has its own unique special rule. You can upgrade the unit sort of by buying a different leader for that unit. The army itself has a special rule, and that's about it. The game has a mechanic where not only are you fighting on the tabletop, but you also have these special activations, the tactics board. And the tactics board basically allows you to do an extra fight or draw extra tactics cards. Tactics cards allow you to do something unexpected in your turn. Good game, badly supported. Trying to get hold of even the second wave in the UK is just a nightmare. And that always definitely cramps people's style when they're playing a game that they enjoy. Big fan of Risk. Risk is probably the first war game that I played. A friend bought me Risk, and this is Captain America Civil War. I have never got around to playing it. It's one of those sad things, you always have not enough time, too many games to play. What are you doing, Sam? Another packet of Dreadfleet. Why? Why do you have to? I actually bought the first one, the painted one, for £30, and I thought that's a really good deal because, again, the terrain alone and the battle mat is definitely worth it. And the guy on the table across from the person I bought the Dreadfleet from went, "Oh, I've got a copy of that noon box." And I said, "Well, how much do you want for it?" And he said, "How much did you pay for that one?" I said, £30. He said, "Done." Didn't mean to buy it, but it's worth £30 just for, as I said, the terrain, the battle mat, and the gorgeous miniatures. I've kept it in plastic because I might decide to sell it, or I might do a giveaway on my channel. Apart from that, not much else to say. I said that Ankh was part 3. Here is part 2. Well, this is more specifically the Kickstarter exclusives for part 2. Rising Sun is probably my favourite in the series. I feel like it got the balance right between the uniqueness of each of the factions and the just general ease of play. This one has you conquering Japan. You've got a lovely big map of Japan, especially if you bought the neoprene map. And each of you takes turn placing your models. You have 3 phases. Again, seems to be a theme with these sort of games by Adrian Smith and Lang, I believe. Yeah. Definitely worth a try out. You're each a faction in Japan. You've got to conquer it. You can summon gods, you can summon dragons, you can summon demons, and it changes the game up. Each of your clans has its own special rule, unlike in Blood Rage. And then you've also got the upgrade cards that you buy. It features a really cool mechanic where you have alliances. When you're in an alliance, you gain the benefits of your allies' action. And that might seem really unfair, but they have a betray mechanic, which is really hefty. And what that means is you get to replace your opponent's models on the board. So even if you're not the one in an alliance, don't worry. It's actually fairly well balanced. I have one on both sides of the equation. I have one as the solo player, and I have one as the player in the alliance. Really good game. If you were to buy any of the 3, this should be the one that you're spending your hard-earned cash on. Miremarsh! Miremarsh was one of the first games that I actually did when I was doing a video review for Geek Pride. That's Matt Geavy's company, if you've ever watched us on the podcast. And I really enjoy it. It's both a good game for, advanced players, but it's also a good game for if you've got little kids, because you can adapt it really easily. You start in the Goblin Village, and the aim of the game is to complete one of the 4 missions around the edge. You're trying to be the next Goblin King, and you can achieve that by killing the old Goblin King, capturing a unicorn, stealing a baby. They can change, and basically the way you win is by achieving those by reaching through the swamp. Level 1 can be traps or it can be monsters. Level 2 will be harder traps and monsters, and level 3 will be the hardest of all, barring the actual end mission. On every single card you have silver, which means that you have to achieve it or you die. So for example, dodging out the way of the trap. And then you have brown objectives, which is, nice to do, you get extra stuff. If you gamble on it, you die. Now, you'll notice I mentioned dying a lot in this because it's kind of a core mechanic. When you die, you pop like a disgusting goblin piñata, and all the stuff you've collected scatters around about it. You're not out of the game though, because there's a deck of goblins and you draw a new goblin. There's 2 ways to win. One is those previously mentioned objectives. The other one is to be the least useless goblins. If you're the last goblin alive, that's also a valid way to win. Not as maybe awe-inspiring as the other victories, but a good one nonetheless. A lot of fun. The way you do each mission, you have dice. You get those dice depending on your goblin. So one goblin that's good at sneaking will have a lot of green dice. One goblin that's good at observation will have white dice. And a goblin that's good at fighting will have black dice. You can enhance your goblin either by recruiting spells or followers or pets, or just buying equipment that you'll get as you go through fighting. Really quick, really easy to learn the mechanics of, really fun. The only sort of downside of this one is if everyone follows the same path, the second or third person that follows you is most likely to win. So try and encourage yourselves to all go different routes, and just remember it's a game. The expansion to Miremarsh. There are certain times when I play games that I'm like, I don't see how this game could get any better. Things like Kings of Tokyo. I absolutely love Kings of Tokyo. And so I've just never played with the expansion. Same thing with Miremarsh. I need to play this at some point. It adds this element of a second board, a different board for different conditions. But it also allows you to actually have influence when you die. As I said, a lot of dying happens. So the ability to keep on playing afterwards with ghosts is a pretty cool mechanic. Unfortunately, I've never played it because I never felt the need to, because I enjoyed the core game so much. Galaxies of Trian. I like this game, however, it is a lot of math. I think it's a fun game to play, and then who cares whether you win or lose. You're basically placing tiles and you're making a star system, and when you place your tiles, as you enclose different places of space, you score points. So if I make a chain of planets on the tiles, I score points. If I close off a nebula, I score points. If I close off these yellow bits, these inner and outer space, I score points. When I make ships or when I colonize planets, I get points. You get the idea. When you're building planet systems, it's the person with the most ambassadors on the planet systems that wins when the chain is closed. So you got to be considering that. There's also multipliers, like if you build space stations, they're worth more points. It can get pretty hefty. They did a second edition with miniatures. Unfortunately, I missed it, and so I never got a chance to buy the upgrade pack. So it kind of sits here a little bit unloved. Still a good game though, and I do enjoy playing it whenever I get a chance. Perhaps another one of those ones which shouldn't be in this list, Titanicus. I'm not entirely certain you could call it a board game. It comes in a box though, I suppose. You play as the giant aforementioned Titans. A lot of fun. I, of course, took the piss and bought the biggest Titan they possibly sold. Now they've released a bigger one. My friend tends to go with the more traditional Warlords, some Reaver Titans. A lot of fun if you like that kind of game. Each of your Titans has upgrade spots, so you can have, heavily armored ones, you can have ones with big guns, you can have ones with lots of close combat weapons. You can win using various different methods. One of my favourite tactics is to take the little Warhound Titans and run them straight into my friend's big Titans and basically kamikaze them. That way when my big Titan, which is a bit slower, moves up into place, his are already squished up, and then I blow them up with my massive cannons. A lot of fun. Another Games Workshop game. If you like Games Workshop games, you'll probably like that one even better because it's pretty well balanced. This, if you're going for a non-miniatures game, is probably my favourite. The Champions of Midgard is a great game where each of you is basically creating a different clan and you are fighting over the village itself. Every single turn, the village is attacked by a troll. And if you don't kill a troll, you get dishonor. Dishonor is multiplier at the end of the game. The more dishonor you have, the bigger the multiplier on your score. You gain score by doing things like hunting monsters, hunting Draugr, hunting giants, and if you're playing with the Valhalla edition, hunting legendary monsters like, I've forgotten what they're called. The big serpent Jormungandr, or maybe you're fighting the wolf, the end of time, those kind of things. So that's pretty fun. Get the game. It's a lot of fun. You gather your tribe by hiring different dice. Black dice are berserkers. You've got spear dice. You've got swordsmen. And you can do things like buy wood to get yourself ships or get food to go on long voyages. Each of the voyages has an encounter, so you might be really unfortunate and all your people die because all the food gets washed overboard. Definitely going to talk about this one, and it deserves its own video, so you'll see that at some point on the channel. Now, my little brother and I haven't always seen eye to eye on sort of what we enjoy playing. He's a massive video gamer. I'm a very lazy video gamer. He's a D&D veteran, master, DM, all that jazz. I do like D&D, I've just never got into it. For that reason, I gave him my Conan a couple of years ago. If you've never seen the Conan Kickstarter, I believe by Mythic. No, Monolith, by Monolith. It came with hundreds and hundreds of miniatures, and I just wasn't playing it, so I gave it to him because I knew that he would enjoy the miniatures. He reciprocated by giving me Vindication, and I am ashamed to say that I have never got around to playing it. He bought it because it has a whole bunch of miniatures in it, but the miniatures then didn't really suit his games. Definitely need to play it at some point. I've heard good things about it, so that one is going at the top so I can get easy access to it. And maybe when the lads come over next week, I will give it a game. Rising Sun core box, just to give you a quick look at the back, there is that beautiful map of Japan, and each of the sort of provinces will get fought over at different points. We've also got our seasons, so each season there'll be different items that you can recruit from, and each of the provinces is worth different points. The more provinces you've conquered in total by the end, the more points you score. So if you manage to conquer every single province, you get a whopping bonus of like 30 points. Each of your different factions is coloured differently. I wish I hadn't zenithal them because now you can't tell the difference between them unless you played a lot. And then of course you've got your monsters. There are expansions for this. I would recommend you play the beginning game to death and then look up the expansions because they're definitely worth it. Including the one that allows you to add Chinese factions to the game because they have very different rule mechanics. One of my friends, bless him, he buys a lot of games and then never plays them. The reason he buys them is he sells inserts for games. So if you ever need inserts for games or 3D models printed, you should check out thewonderemporium.gb on Etsy. Nigel's an absolutely fantastic lad, but he didn't think he was going to get around to playing Curse City, and he gave it to me, which was very generous of him. I want to play it. I also want to paint it, so that will be hitting the table at some point. Onto my second box of storage already. Mythic Pantheon went through an update at one point. This upgrade pack was to fix problems with it, but also to make it more in line with the second season that's coming. The second season, which is going to be called Ragnarok. And it's, instead of going to be the Greek Pantheon, it's going to be the Norse Pantheon. We also have definitely had hints at a third one, which is going to be the Egyptian one. So of course I got that as well. The miniatures, they're just getting better and better and better. It's unbelievable. So that's going to go in here. So we need to sort that through. Dreadball Extreme. Dreadball, which we'll come across later, is one of, well, it's my favourite sports game, period. It's right up there. Is it my favourite miniatures game? It's difficult because it doesn't really fall into the same niche as other miniature games, so it feels a little bit unfair to compare it. Is it my favourite miniatures board game? Maybe. I definitely want to play the most because I absolutely love it. This is actually a spin-off. They were trying to get people more into the game by creating one that was more like a miniatures game. The game is played on hexes and it's a sports game, but this one has things like traps, etc. Never really took off. The Kickstarter did fine. This box often sells for about £5 when you're at one of their events, so I picked up an extra box just because it was worth doing that for the nice mats and nice miniatures inside. It's definitely a good way to get into your collection because you get the 3 teams. You get the Convicts, the Nebula Marauders, and you even get a mixed team called Ronnie's Rejects, which are definitely worth it. Oh, heaviest box in here. The Mythic Pantheon actually comes across like 12 boxes. So what I did was I combined them to sort of shrink it down. So I've got Gods in one, Heroes in another, and this one had the Titans, which is probably my favourite expansion. Unlike the Gods, who are very much about supporting their sort of worshippers, enhancing them, the Titans are just horrendously powerful units on their own right. You've got Typhus, you've got Zeus's dad, whose name escapes me right now. You fight him in God of War, Vesuvius, you've got Gaia. Really good, but it's really heavy because I've put all the boards in this, so it weighs an absolute ton. The Dark Souls board game. The Dark Souls board game I didn't really like when it came out, which is one would question why I bought it, considering I'm so bad at the games that I just had to give up because I wasn't willing to lose that much. I, however, persevered with it, and the community has come up with loads of good rules, sort of to how to make it faster, because the biggest problem is it features the same sort of grinding mechanic as the actual game, which means that you could play for hours and hours and hours and then die and it loses it all. A couple of tweaks like getting more experience, tweaks like being able to change the room. So after I've beaten a room, I always change out the encounter card, so it's a different set of monsters and a different arrangement, and that really helps with the fun of it. Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun now. I'm always in two minds about selling it because I didn't love it when they brought out extra expansions. I didn't buy them, and now some of them are going for just silly money. So I don't know about you, but I'm a bit of a completionist, and when I can't get the expansions, like in Conan, I tend to get rid of a game. But like I said, I enjoy that one, so I've sort of kept hold of it. It's kind of in limbo at the moment. Great example of a way to tell if a game is in limbo for me is if some of the expansions are still in shrink wrap. Shame on me. Shame on my pile. Get those tucked away. When they make games like this, I wish they would at least do the width the same. because when you're trying to pack them away, they never want to stack. Spartacus. Gladiators are one of my favourite sort of ideas. I love the idea of a gigantic arena where, you know, your warriors duke it out to see who's the best of the best. And this game has a mechanic not only where you're doing the fighting, but you're doing the intrigue. So you're running each of the different, and I have forgotten the word, houses, for want of a better word. I'm sure it begins with a T. But basically, you've got all the different houses, you play as them, you recruit the heroes, and then you fight in them. I bought it, and the game just isn't quite what I wanted. But this game really spurred me on to decide to try and make my own game. So at some point, I'm going to do a video on making my own game, probably in the near future. And at least some of the inspiration came from this game. So, probably won't play it again. I didn't really like their game mechanics. And again, there's one of the expansions that you just can't get hold of for love nor money. Now, somewhere around here is the box lid for Mythia, because I kept it handy, and now I've managed to lose it. Well, wherever it is. Mythia, great game. It's a board game, and I don't know if you can see on the back there, one of the cool mechanics about it is it's all based on these little circles, these islands that float around. As the game unfolds, you can use your character's special ability to sort of move those mountains around. When you have little armies and big armies, and there's monsters that sort of circulate around the board, by being able to move the order of the islands, you can place your enemy's leader apart from their army, or you can place their enemy's leader right next to a terrifying monster that's circulating around. On each of the islands you have objectives, so one of you might need to harvest crystals, one of you might need to harvest some other kind of resource, whether it's to gain points for winning the game or whether it's for making yourself a bigger army. And in that mechanic of when you move stuff around is quite key. I've played it at least half a dozen times, and I enjoy it every single time. It's a good game. However, it is a little bit complicated, so you end up having to play the basic game quite a lot. I don't know if you ever encounter this, but when you have a game like that, you exhaust people, and so they don't want to play it again. So that's one of those games. I really enjoy it though, that's why I bought the second one. And when you have both of them, you can combine them to make a third super game, so you play with both boards, which is pretty nice. More expansions for Ankh. As I mentioned before, cool many or not love. There are hundreds and hundreds of miniatures. If you are a fan of Egyptian mythology, they are some really nice miniatures though. And each of them have their own special mechanics, which is always good as well. More Mythic Pantheon, this time all the cards all separated out nicely. Blood Rage, they did a second run where they did some expansions. An expansion to the Champions of Midgard. This expansion added in the ability to go into the Dark Mountains. That meant that you could fight Jotun without having to go on boats to do adventures. It also added Valhalla expansion, which allowed you to do things like recruit Valkyrie dice, as well as when your models die, you actually go and fight in Valhalla in legendary battles. Definitely worth picking up. Batman! Batman's a funny one. This isn't actually my game. One of my local gaming groups decided they wanted to invest in Kickstarters, which was a great idea, except none of them wanted to have the game at their house. I keep trying to give it back to them, but they keep just leaving it here. And I don't want to open it because it's not really my game. It's a lot of fun. If you like the Conan games, you'll enjoy the Batman game. It's basically the same as Conan, except with Batman villains. And this is the Kickstarter one with all of the lovely expansions. So hopefully at some point I can give it back to them. They even brought out a game mode, which I think was long overdue, which allows you to do versus. So one of you can control one of the factions and someone else controls the other one. So you can do a straight on battle if you want to. The Villainous box set. Nope, that's quite clearly the heroes. Those are clearly the heroes, even though they look like the villains. The miniatures in this are really nice, and in fact, I thought when I was first eyeing this up, whether I was going to buy it for myself before the club bought it, whether I should get them to play Night Models DC miniatures game, because these miniatures are so nice. You also get the absolutely ridiculous Bat Cow. Villainous box set. Batman expansion. Not even sure what this one is. 20 miniatures. Doesn't even say what's in the back of the box. It just says a picture. More or less saving on ink there. Actually managed to paint most of the Dark Souls miniatures. Then I got to the bosses, which you would think is the coolest models, but I'd burnt myself out by the time I'd painted all of the little rubbishy models. I then just didn't feel like painting the big ones. But very nice models. One of the expansions, sort of the Kickstarter goals that they did, was they put every single backer's name in both Ikion and Thea, which is quite cool because if you look in there, you'll find my name. I think it's on like row 16, value 20, I want to say. Would it be nice if they'd given us grid references so we could find that kind of thing easier. One thing I guess we're recording from the floor now. One of the things I'm always curious about is, do people keep these inserts? They're great for your models until they're painted and then they rattle around. And they also take up so much space. I'm always in two minds about this. I always think to myself, when I've fully painted it, I'll come up with some different solution. But how often do you manage to get a full board game painted? That's another question. Little expansions, we've got a little expansion for Spartacus. One of the expansions, the Shadow and Snakes one. Really hard to get hold of, never managed to get it. So that's just the Shadow of, I want to say Grammaticus, could be completely wrong there. Rising Sun expansion, Mantic expansions. Rising Sun expansion. This one allows you, as I said, to bring in the Chinese factions. Possibly one of the coolest expansions for any game. It's not just adding the clans in, but it actually brings in more season cards, which makes the game more diverse. It brings in monsters, which again makes the game more diverse. But bizarrely, they decided to change up the mechanic entirely. These guys don't pray to the same gods as the Japanese gods. They actually have their own god cards, which completely changes how they play compared to the standard game, which again, great. That's what you want for an expansion. Lastly, we have this mysterious box. If you were to look closer, it's actually the models for the Silver Tower game. I had both Silver Tower and Hammerfell. I try and avoid these kind of campaign games now, just because trying to get a group of people together is getting harder and harder. One of the few good things about lockdown last year, or whenever it was, 2020, was because everyone was locked down, all your friends, doesn't matter where they are in the UK, were happy to play these kind of campaign games on things like Tabletop Simulator. I have never played as many games as I did during lockdown, which is funny considering we were locked down so we couldn't see anyone. If you ever want to play a campaign game, I thoroughly recommend checking it out. It takes all of the recording out of it, it takes all the setup out of it, and it means that you can have a game set up and come back to play it whenever you like. Fun for that, not so fun now in person, where if you play the first game, you then got to remember all the details and keep it set up for next game. Those are all my main board games. I have other board games which I consider the sort of the non-nerdy stuff. Although having said that, I can see Horizon Zero Dawn from here, and of course that is one of the nerdier ones. I have a whole bunch downstairs which are more acceptable games. They're the games where you have friends over for dinner and you can normally persuade them into playing. I've got things like Museum Rush, where you run in and you rob museums. You're all different criminals and the security guards are wandering around. That's a lot of fun. I've got the games like Love Letter. Love Letter's good. If you are feeling like you don't want to send secretly love letters to one another, you could get the Batman one. Basically what it is you draw a card every turn and you play one of those cards, and each of the characters has an ability. So for example, a guard allows you to guess what the other person's card is. If you get it right, they're knocked out of the game. And the objective is to be the last one standing after the deck has been resolved. You've got things like Selfish. Selfish is a game where you're in space and basically you're all floating around and you've got to be the last one, or you've got to be the first one to get to the spaceship before you fly off and leave everyone else to die. That's a good game. I've also got things like Boss Monster. Boss Monster, where you reach a different monster and you build your lair. Each lair can have 5 rooms in it. You can also upgrade those rooms to advanced rooms. So if you had a trap room that was spikes, you could upgrade that to like a boulder room where it drops something and crushes your opponents. Every turn, there are heroes that get drawn in, and those heroes are attracted to the dungeon with the most artifacts. Each room has an artifact, maybe holy, maybe money, maybe fighting, and so they'll come in here. Basically, you've got 10 wounds, and the first person, or is it 5 wounds, and the first person to get to 10 victory points wins. It's a really good game. I also got a couple of expansions for that. Got Dobble. Dobble is like Snap on steroids. Every single card has 8 icons. When you play one of the cards, you've got to match that to something else. It also has loads and loads of little mini games, so it's not just Snap. It's, you know, loads of different variants. Like you've got to give the card to someone that has a matching symbol with you, or you've got to take cards from the middle and the person with the most cards wins. That's a really good game. I have Tiny Towns. Tiny Towns allows you to set up the board and you've got to fill it in, kind of like Tetris. Every round someone will say a token, maybe they say the red, you take a red token, and when you build a shape and you've completed it, you can trade that in for a particular building. That building might give you points for, if it's a house and it's fed, then you get points. If it's a mill, it can feed houses. If it's a factory, whenever someone says red, for example, you can choose a different color. That's a lot of fun. At some point, I'll make a list of all my games and do it in a more formal manner. But I thought it might be interesting to see sort of a behind the scenes as I'm packing stuff away as well. If you've got any questions about any of those games, do let me know. If you want to see a full review on any of them, let me know as well. That's exactly what these kind of videos are for. They're for something a little bit more informal that allows me to give back to you guys. So thank you very much for watching, and a special thank you to all my patrons. See you later.